Today we profile Charles Taylor, the former leader of Liberia, who was a controversial figure and was infamous for being a warlord. He unleashed brutal violence in his home country of Liberia and neighbouring Sierra Leone during his time in power. He was finally arrested and convicted to 50 years in prison on charges of arming Sierra Leone's Revolutionary United Front, a group that killed and tortured thousands of civilians in his campaign to control the nation's blood diamond mines. If you're new to this channel, remember to subscribe. Let's get going with today's video on the warlord that is Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor was born in 1948 to a family of Americo-Liberians, the elite group that grew out of the freed slaves and colonized the region in the early 19th century. He attended university in the United States, where in 1977 he received a degree in economics from Bentley College in Waltham, Massachusetts. He then became the director of Liberia's General Service Administration under President Samuel Doe, the military leader who had gained power in the bloody coup in 1980. Later in 1983, Doe accused Taylor of having embezzled nearly $1 million, and the following year, Taylor fled to the United States, where he was jailed. Before he could be extradited to Liberia, he escaped from jail. Years later, when he was facing trial in a testimony, Taylor gave his account of his escape from the American maximum security jail. He alleges that he managed to flee after getting help from the United States government, only days before a failed US-backed coup attempt to overthrow the Liberian government. He claims that his prison cell was unlocked by a US prison guard late one night in November of 1985. He then walked out of the maximum security area of the Plymouth County Correctional Facility in Massachusetts. Taylor said that he was escorted by the same guard to the minimum security area. Tying a sheet to a window, Taylor climbed out of the window over the prison fence, where a car containing two men was waiting to whisk him to New York. Taylor told the court that he believed the guard who had set him free had to be operating with someone else. His escape took place only days before his friend and Liberian military leader Thomas Kuwompa staged an unsuccessful coup against the Liberian government of President Samuel Doe in November of 1985. Taylor told the court that the US Central Intelligence Agency was working with and arming Kuwompa to overthrow the Doe government in the months leading up to the coup attempt. After his escape, Charles Taylor subsequently resurfaced in Libya, where he took part in militia training under Muammar Gaddafi. He became Colonel Gaddafi's protege. He formed the National Patriotic Front of Liberia, a militia group that invaded Liberia in the late 1989. Taylor's forces advanced on the capital of Monrovia in 1990, but his bid for power was checked by the rival groups. Samuel Doe was killed in the fighting, and for the next 7 years, the armed factions brought a civil war in which more than 150,000 people were killed and more than half of the population became refugees. Although the MPFR never took the capital, it controlled the countryside and its natural resources. The fighting also spilled over into neighbouring Sierra Leone, and at one point, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, attempted to intervene with peacekeeping troops. A 1996 peace pact led to elections on the 19th of July 1997, and after winning the power militarily, Taylor won elections in 1997 with 75% of the votes. Although the polls were probably the most democratic the country had ever seen at that time, Taylor's critics say he bullied and bought the electorate. As president, Taylor restructured the army, filling it with members of his former militia. Conflict ensued between Taylor and the opposition, and Monrovia became the scene of widespread gun battles and looting. During his reign, Taylor is said to have meddled in another civil war raging in Sierra Leone. Witnesses said he sold guns to and arranged attacks for rebel groups in exchange for blood diamonds. However, Taylor wasn't just aiding a rebellion, he was also perpetuating horrific brutality. Over 50,000 people were killed and thousands more were mutilated in more than a decade-long civil war. The rebels were known to amputate limbs, rape women, enslaved survivors of the attack, and forced boys into child armies. At the height of his brutality, a widespread rumor circulated that Taylor kept a bucket of fresh human blood by his bed, and the bucket was renewed every day, from which he drank the blood. When asked about this, he responded, "People believe such silly things," but nonetheless, he never came out to revoke the rumor. There have been accounts of how arms were smuggled from Liberia to Sierra Leone in sacks of rice and diamonds sent back in mayonnaise jars. Gangs of child soldiers were given drugs to desensitize them to the horror of their actions. As many as 500,000 people are estimated to have been killed, systematically mutilated, or suffered other atrocities in Sierra Leone's civil war. An interesting account of Charles Taylor and blood diamonds involves the famous supermodel Naomi Campbell. When Naomi Campbell was testifying in court proceedings over the Charles Taylor case, she admitted to have received a pouch of uncut diamonds after a dinner in Pretoria. The dinner was hosted by the then South African leader Nelson Mandela in September of 1997. Charles Taylor was also a guest. Campbell and the then Liberian president were sitting together and had been mildly flirtatious with one another. She had accepted the dirty-looking stones when they were presented to her later in the night, but insisted she had no idea who sent them. In 2003, following widespread international condemnation, Taylor agreed to go into exile in Nigeria. March of 2006, the Liberian government requested Taylor's extradition, and Nigeria announced that it would comply with the order. Taylor subsequently attempted to flee Nigeria but was quickly captured. He was then charged with crimes against humanity and war crimes committed during Sierra Leone's civil war. He was later sent to The Hague, where he was tried before the Special Court for Sierra Leone. The trial of Charles Taylor began in June of 2007, despite his refusal to appear in court for the opening session. The courts unanimously ruled that he was guilty of 11 counts of aiding and abetting war crimes and crimes against humanity. This made him the first head of state to be convicted by an international tribunal since Karl Dönitz at the Nuremberg trials. In the year of 2012, Taylor was sentenced to 50 years in prison. He was about 64 years at the time. Charles Taylor's rule is an example of what can go wrong when mankind are fueled by greed and the desire to enrich themselves. Thankfully, both the countries of Liberia and Sierra Leone have turned a new leaf and have started the rebuilding process, as well as moving on from their tainted past. This has been today's video. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, cheers.